Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to jump right back into our two-part series on the Book of Esther, Man Plans and God Laughs. So just a quick review very quickly of what we spoke about last week. I don't want to go back into everything, but we'll just review the main theme or the main idea.
Oops.
And the main idea is that that we were talking about last week is this idea that one of the interesting ways that Hashem orchestrates or runs his world, one of the unique techniques that he uses to the purpose of bringing the world about in the direction that it needs to go in, is that every once in a while, sometimes when necessary, Hashem will download a thought, an idea, a concept that is a little bit out of character, that doesn't seem consistent with who we are. It's not logical. It's not typical of our normal thought patterns into our minds, into our brains. And he does so in order to then get us to, act and choose and respond in ways that we otherwise may not have done so, because that's what needs to happen to bring about the next event in this series of events that is ultimately leading either to our own personal redemption and fulfillment, or on a macro global level as well. We spoke about different examples of that last week. I don't want to go back into them now, but that is really one of the main themes or main lessons that we could take away from the Book of Esther, which is that Hashem doesn't take away our free will, but from time to time, Hashem does get involved and put thoughts and ideas into our minds. And as we peel back the verses, and we're gonna take a little bit of a different approach today. So we're not going to keep going forward verse by verse in the Megillah, but what I encourage you to do as we move forward and prepare for Purim, which is next week, is go through this Megillah slowly, step by step, verse by verse, and each verse peels away another layer of the curtain, so that Hashem's interaction, Hashem's involvement behind the scenes is revealed with just a little bit more, just slightly more with each verse as we move forward. And that's really the point of this whole story, that Hashem's name is never mentioned explicitly or directly in the story of the Megillah, but we do ultimately, when we come to the end, we see, oh my gosh, there's no way to understand this other than to see that Hashem's involvement was there all along from the beginning. It's just, at first it's hard to see, and it slowly becomes clearer and clearer. And that, in essence, fills us with a deep, deep sense of love and connection and gratitude and belief and trust in Hashem and his ways. Because we realize that even in our own lives, when we're going through our own challenges or difficulties, Hashem is right there with us all along, holding our hand and guiding us through the difficult moments. So I encourage you to continue learning the Megillah on your own in that direction. Bob pointed out to me last week, and it's a very good point, there's an excellent book. I mean, there are a lot of excellent books. But one of the books that Bob and I both like very much is a book by Rabbi David Foreman. I'm going to show it to you on the screen. It's called something about the Queen. It's called The Queen You Thought You Knew. Hold on, let me just show you here for a second. This book right here, The Queen You Thought You Knew by David Foreman. Okay, if you can order it, you can probably, I see it's a little bit hard to get maybe right now, but you can order it, and they probably have it at Rosenblum's as well. And it's really, really good. But there are many, many excellent books that you can you can read on the Book of Esther to continue beginning to unravel and remove the veils and curtains behind which Hashem is hiding. But I want to shift gears a little bit and take a look at something slightly different over here. So let's go back to our share screen mode. And I want to take a look at a psalm. Now it's interesting, why would we be analyzing a psalm? We know that King David wrote the Psalms. That's his one of his great literary contributions is the the Book of Psalms. And he wrote 150 chapters in the Book of Psalms. And some of these chapters are describing his own experiences in life, his emotional responses. And it's a guidebook for us to understand how to go through life and how to respond and how to react in a way of holiness, in a way of emunah. In addition to those, there are some psalms that he writes as almost like a prophecy, talking about events that were yet to happen, things that were going to transpire many, many years after David would no longer be alive. One of those is Psalm 22. It's on your screen. And the Psalm says, Lamanetzeach ala yeles hashachar mizmor leDavid. The translation, let's say, is like this. It's a little bit hard to translate. Lamanetzeach means a song for the conductor. And what's the topic of the song? The morning doe. The morning doe, the doe meaning the deer, the morning deer, the deer that appears in the morning, Mizmor leDavid, a psalm of David. And the Talmud tells us that this particular psalm, the morning doe, this deer that appears early in the morning, is actually a reference to none other than Esther. That David is referring here to Esther, who, by the way, would live 650 years later, after David wrote this psalm. Okay, so this is a prophecy. He's writing about something that didn't happen yet. Now it's interesting to take note why David felt the need or the appropriateness of writing a psalm about Esther. The Talmud actually tells us a very interesting idea, which is that David, in a sense, was responsible for the story of Purim. I'll give you an opportunity here to see if anyone can figure out how that might be. Can anyone figure out? Does anyone know? This is this is a difficult question over here. Can anyone tell us why King David, has a connection to the story of Purim, in particular to Mordechai and Esther? How is he sort of in some way responsible for the story of Purim? Does anybody know? It's tough. It's not an easy question. Okay, I'll tell you what the Talmud says over here. In fact, I'll show you what the Talmud says. So this is found in Tractate Megillah. There's a whole tractate in the Talmud that deals with the story of Esther and the book of Esther. So the family of Judah, now David comes from the tribe of Judah, okay? The family of Judah would say, I caused the birth of Mordechai. I'm responsible, the tribe of Judah claimed, we're responsible for the birth of Mordechai. Now, why is that? Because if you remember the story of King David, when his son, Avshalom, was trying to take over the throne, and David was fleeing from Jerusalem, he was running away from this violent attempt to overthrow his government. And as he's running away, he gets attacked. He gets verbally attacked and even physically attacked by somebody named Shimei, the son of Gera. And he started throwing stones at him and he started cursing him. This is found in the book of Samuel, chapter 16. And at that point, it would have been absolutely appropriate for David to have executed Shimi ben Gera on the spot. And in fact, King David's general, whose name was Yoav, suggests just that. We should kill this person right here, right now, because he's cursing and throwing stones at the king. So David says, no, leave him alone, don't touch him. And there's a lot to talk about why that happened, but the Talmud tells us one of the reasons why King David decided not to touch or not to harm Shimi ben Gera is because he saw, with prophecy, of course, that Mordechai and Esther were going to be descendants of his. Specifically Mordechai. It says, what does it say? What is Mordechai's name as listed in the Megillah? Mordechai ben Yoer ben Shimi ben Kish, Ishimini. He is the grandson of this Kish. Okay. Now, who's Kish? Kish is the father of Shimi. So Mordechai is a direct descendant of Shimi ben Gera. So when David chooses not to kill Shimi ben Gera, by doing that, he is in essence allowing for the possibility of Mordechai to come into existence. So it's very interesting to see how the story of Esther is the seeds of this story are being planted hundreds and hundreds of years before the story even takes place. So David composes a psalm about Esther, and he feels that. Yeah.
Can I was trying to add something originally that struck me with regard to the connection between Esther and David. David made this terrible mistake in asking to be tested for whatever reason. And Esther is a kind of rectification of that mistake.
How is she the rectification of that mistake exactly?
It was clearly a function of ego. She had to be directed by Mordecai, but she actually made the decision for reasons other than her own ego, whereas David was fully connected with, I'm as good as the patriarchs.
Okay, very interesting. I like that. It's a good connection. Okay, so now going back to this psalm, David writes a psalm, and he writes a psalm about Queen Esther. And he refers to Queen Esther as the morning doe, the morning deer. Now, why in the world what's the connection between Esther and the morning deer? So the Talmud tells us a very interesting statement, and we're going to focus on this statement for most of this morning. Okay, what does the Talmud say? The Talmud says, just as the morning marks the end of night, right? Morning is that significant moment when the night ceases to be and the day is about to begin. Just like morning marks the end of the night, so too Esther marks the end of the period of miracles. Okay, one more time. Just as the morning, why is Esther compared to the morning doe, the morning deer? Because when the morning deer arrives, that means the morning has come, and the morning signifies the end of night, and Esther signifies the end of miracles. Okay. Now we have to think about what that means. Let's just pause, stop the share here. Okay. This is problematic. And I'm going to share with you why I find this statement problematic. I want to make sure everybody understands the difficulty before we move on. Okay. If you think about night, when we think about night, what are we thinking about? We think about darkness. We think about, the Talmud says that night is an analogy, or it's a parable for exile, the exile of the Jewish people. When we're in exile and we're groping in the dark, we're not in our own land, we're not in our own country, we don't have our own control, we don't have sovereignty, we're groping in the dark. That's exile. Exile is always compared to night. Morning when it's bright, when the light comes out, when we have clarity, that is the light of redemption. That is the light of Mashiach. So morning always represents a good time, a positive time, a time of lightness, a time of clarity, a time of redemption. And darkness, evening, night represents exile, darkness, depression, fear, anxiety, all the things that accompany the Jewish people in exile. Okay, so if Esther is the end of the period, it's the conclusion, it's the end of the period of miracles, which we're going to discuss. I'll explain what that means as we move on in a little bit. But miracles, open miracles, basically ended before Esther. Esther ushers in a new era of there are no more miracles. Miracles are done. The period of Jewish history where we experienced miracles ends, and then Esther appears. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Miracles are gone, right? We will no longer see Hashem's open hand. We'll no longer see Hashem operating directly in history. That's all gone. All the open miracles, the parting of the Red Sea, the giving of the Torah, the plagues in Egypt, the miraculous manna falling from heaven, that all ends right before Esther shows up. So my question is, and this is the question that's very difficult and perplexing, shouldn't Esther be compared to the beginning of the night? If Esther is the period of time when, okay, that's it, no more Hashem, no more miracles, Hashem is now hidden, we can't see God anymore, all the miracles are done, then why is Esther compared to the beginning of the morning? Morning being a time of light, a time of clarity, a time of redemption, a time of Mashiach, she should be compared to the beginning of the night, right? So what does the Talmud mean? If anything, if David wants to write a psalm about Esther and compare her to a period of time in the daily cycle, he should have said Lama Netzech Ala Yelas Halayla, a song of the conductor to the doe, to the deer of the evening, of the nighttime. And then the Talmud would have said, just like nighttime is the end of the light, so to Esther is the end of miracles. Would that have made more sense? I see some people have their hands up. I'll give you an opportunity in a minute, but I just need to see like if everybody, if the question is, people are getting the question. Is the question hitting? The question resonating? Do I need to repeat it? If I need to repeat it, go like this. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. So, okay, Marilyn, you wanted to say something? You have to unmute yourself there.
I'm just wondering if it's because, it's in her name. There still are miracles and there still would be miracles, but the miracles are going to be hidden, just like her name means hidden. It's not that there are no more miracles, but the miracles aren't just out there.
Okay. Yes, I think that's true, and I think that's partially what it means. But why is that considered a good thing? That Hashem is no longer going to be, he's going to be hidden. He's going to be concealed. We're not going to see him anymore. All the open miracles, all the clarity, all the emunah that comes from the miracles that we see Hashem performing open miracles, that's done. So that doesn't seem like a good thing. That doesn't seem like something you should compare to the coming of the light, the coming of redemption, the coming of clarity of the morning. That seems to be something Hashem is now concealed. Hashem is now hidden. Hashem is no longer present in a way that one can perceive. That should be compared to the night. Okay. Michael Harris.
So I guess it depends on why God is being hidden. If he's being hidden because we're no longer worthy of miracles, then, the direction you're talking makes sense. But if it's being hidden because our faith has reached a level where we don't need open miracles, that we can have faith in concealed miracles, then it's a step forward.
Okay, very good point. Okay, well, we could consider that as a possibility. I see in the chat that Carol also said a very nice point, which is that man has more responsibility in creation once Hashem's no longer poofing open miracles. So in a sense, our added responsibility could be what's good, so to speak, about this new situation, new reality. Yeah, Scott?
Maybe it's just a maturity perspective. Like, they don't need me anymore. Let them do it on their own now. Like, stop relying on me. You can do this.
Okay, good. That's. I mean, I think that's along the lines a little bit of what Michael's saying. Also, maybe it somehow represents us being on a higher level. Yes, Susie, I see you're there.
Oh, yeah, I agree with Michael. I was thinking along those lines that they're no longer needed for some reason. We don't need miracles. We didn't need miracles anymore.
Okay, so miracles are maybe a crutch in a sense, and maybe we no longer need the crutch. Okay.
The Gemara tells us that the Torah was reaccepted in the days of Purim, and maybe that ties to Michael's point as well.
It does very much. Well, maybe if I remember, I'll try to add something about that at the end, because it's very much connected. Yeah, Susie Futterman.
The pattern of our history is that we have to have exile before we have redemption. We were 210 years in Egypt before we could receive the Torah. So maybe this is, we're back in exile now. And in order for Mashiach to come, there has to be the dark before the light. And so this is the point in time that Hashem.
So the dark is good in the sense that it means it's the dawn of Mashiach.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's an interesting thought. Yes, Les.
I think that I like what Michael had to say about this. I think that what this says to me is we've reached a point where the power of free will is augmented, so that it is a positive development that allows us a greater part in world history. That if you eliminate the open miracles, as you were saying, Rabbi, they tend to be a kind of crutch. If everything were an open miracle, there would not be very much substance to the concept of free will. It'd be far too easy to conform to reality. There has to be a legitimate alternative to the right answer, which means that there is greater significance, greater value that comes back to each of us individually for making the right choice.
Okay, so I think maybe a common theme of what everybody is saying is somehow counter to our initial thought, or maybe slightly counterintuitive, but it seems somehow that that a more ideal reality is one where Hashem is not openly poofing blatant miracles that override the course of nature, and somehow that represents a higher level. And I think that is where what we're trying to understand over here. And I think that everybody's on the right track. Let me just take it a step further over here. So a few weeks ago, we studied Parshas Beshalach. I mean, we read in Shul Parshas Beshalach. Beshalach is a great parsha. There's so much in that parsha, including, of course, the parting of the sea and the song at the sea, which is an epic moment. That whole Shabbos takes on a theme based on the song of the sea. That Shabbos is referred to as Shabbos Shira, the Shabbos of song, because on that particular Shabbos we read the song of the sea. And that moment when we read, when the Jewish people, after 210 years of slavery, finally leave Egypt and they experience the miracles of the sea, and they come out on the other end and they sing together in unison is one of the highest moments in the entire Torah. So then when you continue the Parsha to the end, all of a sudden, one of the low points in the Parsha, in the Torah shows up. And that is the first time that we are attacked by that enemy of ours, that nation that's going to continue to be our arch enemy until the dawn of Mashiach. And that is, of course, Amalek. So it always seemed to me that Hashem chopped up the Parshas in the wrong place. That he should have ended the Parsha of Bishalach on a high note, and then maybe started, the next week's Parsha, Yisro, with the story of the attack of Amalek. Why do these things find themselves in the same Parsha? Why are they connected? And I think there's actually a very, very beautiful message that could be taken away from this. But let's talk about the song for a second. It's interesting. The Jewish people are experiencing slavery. They go through this national trauma that lasts for generations. And when it finally ends, and all of a sudden they could see Hashem really behind everything. They understood why they went through slavery. They understand what the experience was and why it was necessary and what they needed to learn and how they needed to grow from the experience of slavery. And all of a sudden, it all became totally clear to them. And the reaction to that was Shira, song. Because when you think about song, what is song? When you go to a symphony, we went to the Jerusalem Symphony the other night. It was absolutely wonderful. And when you watch a symphony, you pay attention, it's really kind of a weird thing. You have many, many instruments, 30, 40, 50, however many instruments. Each instrument is playing random notes at random times, but somehow in the brilliance of the composer and the conductor and the way it all fits together, when you play those notes in just this perfect order, it all sounds marvelous, like a symphony. That's what music is. It's a series of random notes, but they're connected to each other in such a way that they produce something art of beauty and of art. And that's what song is. So when the Jewish people crossed the Red Sea, and all of a sudden, with the clarity of hindsight, they were able to understand the last 200 plus years of history and why things happened the way they did. They sang, and that was their natural response, was the joyful response of song, of music. And on that Shabbos, we've talked about this before on Parshas B'Shalach, that Shabbos, I think the message for us, the takeaway for us of the Song of the Sea and that whole episode is that we as Jews, as human beings, are encouraged to live our lives like a song. What does it mean to live your life as a song? You can go through life and fail to see the divine orchestration behind everything. You can go through life and fail to connect the dots of one event, one occurrence, one episode, one interaction with another and another and another. But to live your life as a song means to see a holistic picture of everything that has happened to you since you were born and before you were born, generationally. But every generation and as an individual, to connect every moment of my life together and to see Hashem's hand orchestrating every moment, every experience, every interaction that I have. That's what it means to live your life like a song, not as a bunch of random disconnected notes, incidents and occurrences that have nothing to do with each other. But we're encouraged to live our lives and see our lives as a song, and to connect the dots and to look for the hashgacha, look for the divine providence in our lives, and to see Hashem's hand and to try to see how Hashem is divinely orchestrating everything in our lives. That's what it means to live your life as a song. So that's what we learn from the Song of the Sea. By the way, one way I always tell people that you should have a notebook, keep a notebook where you jot down all of the Hashem moments in your life, and you keep a record of them, keep track of them, and see them, and then start to spend time trying to figure out and piece it all together. Oh, right. I that happened because I had to meet this person, and when I met this person, I learned this piece of information that led me into this direction, which then brought me to meet this person. And you connect all the dots of your life. At the end of the parsha of Beshalach, we meet Amalek. What is Amalek all about? What does Amalek stand for? Amalek stands for the exact opposite of what it means to live your life as a song. Amalek is the philosophy, the worldview that everything that happens by chance, by coincidence, that there's no divine orchestration in anything. Don't look for Hashem's hand in your life, because there's no such thing as Hashem's hand. It's cause and effect. Cause and effect. You do something, something happens. You do something random, nothing, not related, not connected. So Purim time is the time when we begin to re-engage ourselves in the war against Amalek. Now, we know today that you can't fight a battle against Amalek, because who is Amalek anyway? Who is this Amalek? We don't know who Amalek is. We can't just go out to the street and identify this person is Amalek, I'm going to fight against him, and she's Amalek, I'm going to fight it. We don't know. So what does it mean today to us living, in 2023 to fight against Amalek? Obviously, it has to mean, if we're told in the Torah that it's an eternal war against Amalek, it must mean that there's a force, there's a concept, there's a principle of Amalek that exists within us that we have to fight. So fighting against Amalek for us means fighting against the tendency that we all have to not connect the dots in our life, to not see Hashem's loving orchestration behind every moment and every experience in our lives, to not live our lives as a song. There's something inside of us. There's an Amalek lurking inside of each and every one of us that says, "Oh, come on, that was a coincidence. Don't look too deeply into that. Don't get all spiritual on me. Life is just a bunch of chemical reactions, and that's it." So now, when we think about the parsha of Beshalach, the order makes perfect sense. First, we learn about the song, and we see that the way the Jewish people respond to that moment of clarity after 210 years of slavery is song, putting the notes together, orchestrating everything, seeing how Hashem is so perfectly and beautifully involved in everything. And the Torah is telling us that we have to live our lives like a song and see every single moment of our lives as being connected to the big picture. If we do that, then and only then are we armed in the battle against Amalek. Then we're ready to fight the war against Amalek. So after we learn about the song, then we hear about Amalek for the first time. Because without the principle of the song, without the lesson of the song, without knowing that our lives are connected, we don't stand a chance against Amalek. Amalek will overpower us instantly, because that power inside of us is so strong. That tendency not to want to see Hashem involved in our lives is so real that we don't stand a chance. Okay, now moving one step forward, going back to Esther. A major change takes place in the world order with Esther. A major shift in the way Hashem operates. Until now, until Esther shows up, until the story of Purim, Hashem performs open miracles, 10 plagues, parting of the Red Sea, the man, the giving of the Torah, all these open miracles. And those open miracles, yeah, they're super cool, right? And they show Hashem's unbelievable control and mastery over the universe. And they show that Hashem created the universe and that he controls it. But in the era of open miracles, during the period of time where Hashem is poofing, pyrotechnics and parting seas and doing all kinds of things, during that period of time, one can still think, if they want to, one has the ability, there's still room for one to think as follows. Yes, of course, there's God. Obviously, I see there's God, and he clearly created the world. But you know what? He created a system called nature, and he pretty much gave over control and the running of the world to this force called nature. On a rare occasion, for some reason, whatever that he sees fit, if necessary, he'll override and intervene and override the course of nature in rare moments. Okay, but barring those rare moments of overriding nature, he pretty much lets nature run its course. And therefore, there's room still to think like a Amalek, that things are pretty much random, that there's cause and effect, things are run by the laws of nature, and life is pretty much about luck and chance and being at the right place at the right time. And most importantly, when you think like a Amalek and everything has to do with luck and chance and being at the right place at the right time, things have what happens in the world has little or nothing to do with my moral choices. So I can be as amoral or as immoral as I want, and that's not really going to affect or change anything. Okay, that's all possible in the realm, in the era, in the time period of open miracles. Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I'm confused. I mean, you're talking about open miracles, you're referring mostly to the Exodus, and now we've got 1,000 years basically till we get to Esther, and
Yeah.
we have you're skipping over all the prophets, and I mean, we're not.
Right. So that's all the period of open miracles. I'm not going through everything, but you know, Givon, the story of the sun standing, the moon standing, the sun standing still, not setting in Givon, Shemesh beGivon dome. Okay, the stories of Shimshon, of Samson, the stories of Gidon, the stories all throughout the period of the judges, and throughout the period of Shmuel, and all that period of time, right? They're all open. They're open miracles in the Tanakh that we see them, right? I was just giving the big famous examples, but there are open miracles that follow the story of the Tanakh all the way up to the period of Esther, and then they stop. Okay, so this is the reality when we live in the era of open miracles, that there are these open miracles. They happen on occasion, okay, and if you see one, you see one. But as soon as the miracle ends, things go back to the order of nature, okay. And one could think, and in that period of time, people did think, okay, phew, the miracle's gone, the miracle's over, he's gone for now, he's left the world back into the order of nature. Nature doesn't care about me, nature doesn't care about what I eat, nature doesn't care about what I say, nature doesn't care about who I worship or who I spend time with, whatever. And you know, we're safe until the next miracle comes around. You know, we're good. I'm safe, I'm off the radar. Okay, but what happens with Esther? What changes when Esther enters the scene? The miracles of Purim are categorically different than the miracles that came before, because the miracles of Purim are cloaked in the garment of nature. From the beginning of the story of Purim until the end of the story of Purim, there is not one moment where nature is overridden. There's no parting of the Red Sea. There's no rivers flowing with blood. There's no manna falling from heaven. There is no celestial bodies hanging in midair. Nothing. Okay. Everything that happens within the story of Purim, the miracles of Purim, are totally 100% within the natural order of things. You know, a king gets drunk, he kills his queen, he has a beauty pageant, he brings in a new queen, an advisor decides he wants to annihilate a certain people. The decree, someone happens to overhear that decree, it's recorded in the book of the king. One natural, normal event after another. It's only when you put them all together and you see every single detail at the end, when you peel away one curtain after another curtain after another curtain until you get to the very end, then you realize, oh, wow, that's crazy. That was Hashem the whole time. Those weren't coincidences. I got to hear that. I want to read that again. And then you read it again the next morning and you see how all of these things, there was no coincidence, there was no luck, there was no chance. It was totally, each moment was totally connected. It was a song. It was a perfect song. But from the point of view of nature, it all occurred within the nature. Hashem never overrides nature at all. Okay. So now, all of a sudden, with Esther, the world order changes. And when people there's no longer room to think anymore that, okay, Hashem's more or less out of the picture. He pretty much gives over the running of the world to nature, rarely, occasionally gets involved. He overrides nature, but no, not anymore. Not anymore. Now, all of a sudden, it's a totally different realization that Hashem, there is no such thing as nature. Hateva is Elohim. It's the same thing, the same gematria, by the way. Nature is Hashem. Hashem is nature. Hashem works in nature. Hashem doesn't give over the running of world affairs to nature and periodically override it. Everything is a manifestation of Hashem's will. Everything in nature, all historical events, all the events of my life, everything that happens, Hashem is intimately involved in every one of these moments. Okay, and now we understand why Purim is about fighting the power of Amalek, and why we need the story of Purim to be able to fight the power of Amalek. Because as long as open miracles are happening, Amalek is totally cool with that. Amalek can say, yeah, of course, Shem created the world, no problem. But ever since that moment, everything is pretty much run by coincidence, run by chance, run by nature. Well, not any longer. Now, once the story of Purim comes in and we really, really understand the story of Purim, and we understand that Hashem is with us at every single moment as a people, as a nation, historically, globally, and as individuals, then there's really no longer any possibility to think like Amalek, to think in the terms of, to fail to see our lives as one connected masterpiece. Okay, so let's just wrap this up, and then we
Rabbi,
can. Yeah.
It seems to me that there's a connection between what's going on in Purim and the end of prophecy at the Hanukkah story, because in both cases you're removing the concrete reality of something miraculous, and the subsequent responsibility that we have as individuals is substantially elevated without that clear identification.
Completely, absolutely. The end of prophecy was before Hanukkah, though. The end of prophecy was around the time of the Purim story. These were the last prophets. Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi were the last prophets. They were that was around the time of the Purim story. But you're right, and that's a heightened responsibility for us. Now, go back to our question. Our question.
David?
Yeah.
Yeah. Weren't we first introduced to this topic kind of with the Joseph story, but it was one individual?
Totally. This is the same ideas that we see of the Joseph story, that things that look like they're bad and they're going in the wrong direction are really all just Hashem orchestrating things in order to, and by the way, it wasn't just one person. It was Joseph was the star of that story, but everything that was happening in the Joseph story was happening for the Jewish people to go through the experience that they needed to do to get into Egypt, so that they could leave Egypt and have the experience that they had when they were there. Yeah, very, very much connected. Okay, so I want to finish, and then we can leave a little time to talk about it. But so the question that we had, this was the question that was bothering me in the beginning. King David wants to write a psalm about Esther. Fine, he has every right to do so, because the whole story of Purim kind of only happened because of him, because he didn't kill Shimi ben Gera, because he let Shimi live, and that made room for Mordechai to come into the world. So he writes a psalm, and in that psalm he compares Esther to the morning deer, the doe of the morning, the Ayelet HaShachar. And the Talmud makes this statement: just like the morning is the end of night, so too Esther is the end of miracles. And the question was, that seems weird. That seems weird. End of miracles. Why is that a good thing? End of miracles should mean we're entering into the darkness, not we've come out of the darkness and we're entering into light. But now we know there were two periods of time in Jewish history. There was the time from the beginning of the story of Genesis until the story of Purim. And that was the period when open miracles took place. Hashem related to the Jewish people through open miracles. But from Purim and on, Hashem no longer relates to us through open miracles, because open miracles are very impersonal. They don't show an intimate involvement, a personal, intimate, daily involvement. But from now on, Hashem relates to us in this deep way of being divinely invested in every moment and every experience that we have as people, as individuals, as a nation. So what's better? What period is better? Oh, and like Len said, I wanted to come back to this. We received the Torah a second time during the Purim story. Why? Because the Jewish people were so filled with an unbelievable love of Hashem at the end of the Purim story, when they realized how Hashem all along was right there, never letting us go. They were filled with such a love, they accepted the Torah again on an even higher level. This time accepting it out of love. The first time they accepted the Torah was because Hashem held the mountain over their heads. This time they accept the Torah out of love because of the recognition of Hashem's intimate, divine involvement. So what's a higher level? And we all kind of were on this track in the beginning. What's a higher level? Open miracles or hidden miracles? So I think what we're saying now is the hidden miracles are actually a greater revelation of Hashem than the open miracles. The open miracles don't reveal Hashem. They reveal a world run by nature with an occasional periodic involvement of overriding nature and then letting go and letting nature take over again. Hidden miracles show a constant, continuous hashgacha, involvement by Hashem in every single moment that never ends and never stops. He never closes his eyes. Lo yanum v'lo yishan. He doesn't slumber, he doesn't sleep. He's always completely involved with us for every moment. That's a greater, the hidden miracles are actually a much greater revelation of Hashem's light, which is why Esther, which ushers in the period, the end of the open miracles and the beginning of the hidden miracles, is perfectly compared to the morning deer by King David, because that's the morning, that's the light of Mashiach. And that's the light of clarity and the light of Hashem's love and involvement in our lives. So that is the, I believe that's the real message of Purim, the real takeaway from Purim. And the reason why it's such an important holiday for us is because from Purim and on, we live in a world of light. We live in a world where Hashem is so intimately connected to everything that happens in our lives. And that is probably the greatest revelation that we can have as Jews, and the greatest message, I think, from the story of Purim. Okay, Larry, I see you put your hand up over there, your virtual hand.
Rabbi, I'm following where you're taking us. The question comes to me that at the crossing of the Red Sea, at the time when we were having miracles, one of the reasons that the miracles took place was a message to the world, all the nations, not just our nation. When the miracles turn hidden, it seems like it's telling our world, the Kal Yisrael, that the miracles still go on, they're still special, but the rest of the world does not get that benefit. And it certainly affects the relationship our nation has with the other nations.
It's interesting. That's a very, I think that's a very good point and a good insight. And I guess our responsibility then as a light unto the nations, as the ones that are responsible for teaching the world about Hashem and his ways, is to try to teach that and show that and demonstrate that to the world. And I don't know if we've done a good job of that or not done a good job of that. I think that the miracles of the modern state of Israel have showed the world quite significantly. I think a lot of people find it very hard to deny Hashem's involvement in things like the 6-Day War and the founding of the state of Israel after 2,000 years. I think that's part of the reason why I think it's so important for the Zionist dream and the Zionist vision, is that we are supposed to continue to teach the world about Hashem and about Hashem's miracles and about Hashem's involvement. And the place that you really see that more than anywhere is in the story of the revival of Israel after 2,000 years. 2,000 years, nobody could plant anything in this country. Nobody could survive. People couldn't survive here because there was no food. There was nothing to eat. And now, it's a great world exporter of food. If you look at Israel and you look at the story, and people that are religious, any religion, who believe in God and believe that God's intimately involved in the world, feels a deep connection to Israel and the story of Israel, because there's nothing in our lifetime, at least, that shows this more, that demonstrates this idea more than the story of Israel. But you're right, that continues to be our responsibility. And Hashem's no longer, doing these open miracles, waking up the whole world and showing the whole world. So now our responsibility becomes even greater, as people have been pointing out.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or comments, questions, insights?
In current history, we have both the 6-Day War and the Iraq War. If you look at the statistics with regard to the damage and that's pretty dramatic as well. Totally.
The amount of Scud missiles that fell in Israel, and nobody was killed from the Scud missiles. It's not doesn't make any sense at all. Okay. That's it. All right, everyone have their plans for Purim set up? You can still sign up, I think. Is it possible to still sign up for Chaim Center Purim? It should be. If anyone doesn't have plans for Purim, make sure you check the schedule, check the emails, and join the Chaim Chevra for a beautiful Purim. And we'll connect afterwards. So wishing everyone a Shavua Tov, Purim Sameach, and see everybody later in the week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.